Hi, my name is Alan Anand. I'm a Vedic astrologer. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Since being elected to Congress this past midterm cycle, she's been very much in the news, especially Fox News, because on behalf of the Republican Party, they hate her so much that, in that major time block, 8 to 11 every evening, they talk about her about a third of the time. So, much to their chagrin, perhaps, they're making her even more famous than she already is, within congressional circles. So, she's the face of the Green New Deal. She's calling for all kinds of radical sort of initiatives like, education, healthcare, environmental protection, et cetera, et cetera. You'll see a lot of stuff on Facebook, making fun of her, saying that she's too young to know what she's doing, she's a little bit crazy, she's naive, she's dangerous. Well, this is what happens, I guess, when you're a self-proclaimed social democrat who's arrived and is now threatening to, shake up everything the establishment holds dear. Well, let's have a look at her chart and see what's going on that's causing such a fuss. So she was born 13th of October, 1989, 11:50 a.m. In the Bronx, New York. So she's got a Scorpio rising chart. Venus is the only angular planet. Now, you would say, wow, somebody who's really trying to shake so many things up and who is talking so militant, are you sure this is right, Venus rising? Well, in Vedic myth, Venus was called Asuracharya, basically the guru for the demons. Uh, so, from a right-wing conservative point of view, I guess she is demonic. Um, and this maybe partly explains it, but I'll get to more of this in a moment regarding Venus and its rising in Scorpio. So, if we doubt her fighting prowess, we need look no further than her ascendant lord. So, Scorpio rising, ascendant lord is Mars. Here it is, well placed in the 11th house, and it's with Sun as well. Now, Sun and Mars are both what we call Kshatriya caste planets. They're associated with leadership, in the old days, the king, his ministers, the general. But, by extension, in modern times, it represents all people who are involved in administration, especially in the government, but also in industry as well, as CEOs, directors, managers, project leaders, etc., and continues to have an affiliation with military and police, all what we'd call command and control kind of functions. Now, Mars in this chart, well placed in the 11th house, is involved in no less than 5 major yogas. Okay, so if you're not practiced at spotting yogas, a quick definition. A Raja Yoga is a combination of a Kendra Lord and a Trikona Lord. So because Mars is the ascendant Lord, it functions as both a Kendra Lord and a Trikona Lord. And so if we look at the pairings involved here, Mars Sun, Mars Moon, Mars Mercury, what can we find? Well, Mars and Sun being paired are a combination of First Lord and 10th Lord. So that's one Raja Yoga. Then Mars Moon opposition constitutes another Raja Yoga, what we technically call a Dharma Karma Adipati Yoga. So that's basically Mars, Lord of the First, combining with Moon, Lord of the Ninth. Then we also have Mercury is a money lord for this chart as Lord of the 11th. Mars and Mercury combining there. The rule for Dana yogas is one of the money lords, that's either Lord of the 2nd or the 11th, must combine with one of the trikona lords. So in this case, Mars, Jupiter or the moon must combine with Mercury or Jupiter. So in this case, we have Mars, ascendant lord, combining with Mercury, 11th lord. So there we have a Dana yoga. Then there's another Raja Yoga here that's not easy to spot if you're not used to doing this, but you have to look not only at pairs and oppositions to find yogas, you also need to look at the special aspects of Mars and Saturn. So Mars, casts an aspect 4 signs forward onto Saturn, while Saturn casts an aspect 10 signs forward, 7, 8, 9, 10, onto Mars. So Mars and Saturn are therefore in mutual aspect. Lo and behold, Mars as ascendant lord combines with Saturn, who is the 4th lord. So there's another Raja Yoga, Dharma Karma Adipati Yoga. Last but not least, Mars-Moon opposition forms what we call a Chandra-Mangala Yoga. It's relatively common, but here it is, and it represents a go-getter. We can always assess yogas in terms of their strength. We should not fail to note here, although that Mars is relatively close to the Sun, it's about 5 degrees separated. It's not what we call total combustion. Total combustion is 3 degrees or less. So this is moderate combustion. Yes, it can make her headstrong, aggressive, but it's not really damaging. Meanwhile, the moon is full. It's just the day before the full moon. So this is a relatively powerful Chandra Mangala Yoga, and in good houses for both of the planets, we expect certain benefits. Now, there are a couple of other yogas in here as well too. The Sun and Moon, their opposition creates a yoga. That's a combination of 9th Lord and 10th Lord. And we have another combination here with Saturn, Jupiter, wherein Saturn is the 4th Lord, a Kendra, and Jupiter is the 5th Lord, a Trikona. So again, if you're paying attention here, you'll see that the easy way to spot yogas is look for clusters and see whether those planets own any auspicious houses. Look for oppositions and see if any other combinations emerge. There's another opposition there with Saturn and Jupiter. And last but not least, look for the special aspects, Mars and Saturn, to see whether they qualify. Which in this case they do. So we've got multiple yogas going on here, just with Mars has 5, and then a couple of other planets, throw in some others. It's always good to, when you look at a chart, to evaluate strength and weakness throughout to see what's good, bad, or indifferent. We could just cycle through. So Venus is ordinary. Saturn is ordinary, Rahu is ordinary, the moon is full, Jupiter is ordinary, Ketu is ordinary, Mercury is strong, we say exalted actually in Virgo, its own sign. Mars is, moderately combust, Sun is ordinary. So, circle around again, Mercury is the strongest planet in this chart. So what does that bring? Critical thinking skills. Can we validate that any further? Well, Sun and Mercury are together, and when they're together and they aspect the 1st or the 5th house, it creates a valid Buddhaditya yoga. The 5th house is the house of critical thinking. So that Sun-Mercury pair is the first prerequisite for a Buddhaditya yoga, but there has to be some connection with the 1st and 5th houses. Occupation, aspect, or ownership. So in this way, that is fulfilled. So Mercury is quite strong here as well. It doesn't hurt that Mercury and Moon form yet another yoga. That's 9th Lord combining with Money Lord. Remember I said that Dana yogas are formed when a Money Lord combines with one of the Trikona Lords. So here Mercury's the Money Lord and Moon in opposition, mutual aspect to it, is the Trikona Lord. So you've got yet another yoga going on there. Some of the criticism that she receives is around her, juvenile enthusiasm and what they call naivete. Well, yeah, she does have moon in Pisces, so maybe she's a dreamer. But as John Lennon once sang famously, um, you know, um, you can say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. So this is true of Ocasio-Cortez as well too. Without dreams, where would we be? While we're on the subject of the moon, let's just do a quick chart rotation here. So if we rotate the entire chart to place the moon at the ascendant point, this is what we call Chandra Lagna. So this is interesting in that first we note how many dual signs there are in this chart. So there's the moon, three more over here, that's four. Jupiter and Saturn make six. 6 out of 9 planets are in dual signs. That's a lot. And it may make for a certain degree of a multiplicity of ideas and notions, some parallel processing, some multitasking, running off in all directions sometimes, some contradictions, some confusion, some walking back initial ideas. But there's no lack of enthusiasm going on here. With the moon, in this hypothetical place of the ascendant, both Mars and Sun aspect that moon, and that heightens her fighting spirit as well. Is she rash and presumptive? Is she ready to, throw down her gloves and take up the fight with just about anybody? Yeah, she is. Will she be wrong sometimes? Yes, it's the nature of Sun and Mars to, kind of go overboard, say the rash thing, do the rash thing, regret later. But, the whole attitude with this Sun-Mars opposite the moon is um, I'd rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. So, with that in mind, she'll go forward doing as she sees fit. Okay, we'll put the ascendant back where it belongs, seeing Venus in this place. It's always productive to note in any given chart, are any houses strengthened by either the occupation of their lord or the aspect of their lord? In such case, we consider that house to be protected in some regard, as if you're the landlord of a house and you live right across the street and you can keep your eye on it all the time, the house is safe. So if we look through the chart here, we'll see that the fourth house is aspected by its lord Saturn. So the fourth house is essentially one's constituency, the people that you work for. The sixth house, Aries, is aspected by Mars through its special aspect 8 signs ahead. So the sixth house is, concerned for the environment, and it's particularly associated with the willingness to engage in competition or conflict, basically the mark of a fighter. The seventh house. The seventh house is aspected by its lord Venus. So the seventh house is about partnering, developing relations, it's outreach, whether you consider that to community or people across the aisle in Congress or beyond America's borders out into the world. So yet again, another positive sign. The 11th house. Mercury occupies the house, so the owner is there itself, and this is good for social engagement, and whether you want to think of that simply as being an adept in social media, which she is, has spent invested a fair bit of time in educating her older congressional confrères in how to use social media, but it also speaks to her political engagement, outreach to community, the power of groups to get things done. So, charisma is a factor, and Venus in the first house can help to provide some of that. Now, I want to conclude just by talking briefly about Scorpio rising, and within this degree span, if you're familiar with uh, the degree spans, uh, you'll know that this is the nakshatra Jyeshta. We actually see it shown down here in the listing. The ascendant is in Jyeshta. Anyway, the last 13 degrees and 20 minutes of any water sign is always owned by Mercury. That's not the point here, but Jyeshta is the nakshatra. Now, many times a rising nakshatra will not be activated, will not display its qualities in life unless a planet is present in the ascendant to anywhere in the sign to activate that nakshatra, or a planet elsewhere in the chart aspects the sign in order to activate the nakshatra within. Well, anyway, so Venus's presence within Scorpio is sufficient to activate the Jyeshta nakshatra. And some of its qualities are about concern for social welfare and environmental conservation, issues regarding power and supremacy, a willingness to engage in competition no matter what the odds, and the capacity to, many times surmount those odds, and ultimately an attitude that effectively says, don't fence me in. Does that sound familiar? Well, anyway, there's more to say about this chart, and I only wanted to talk about her natal chart in this video. But if you want to read more, recap, what was in this video, and also read a little bit more about the Dasha Bhukti that propelled her into power. Oh, and that reminds me, I'm going to interrupt myself here. The whole notion of government service, in anybody's chart, we need to see coming into play connections with three key houses. Those are basically the 10th house, for administration and rulership capacity, the 9th house for the law and the judiciary, and the 5th house for notions of ministry, custodianship of a particular portfolio and so on. So we do have these combinations in this chart. Right here in this cluster, you have the sun, which is lord of the 10th, and opposite you have the moon, which is lord of the 9th. In this case, Jupiter is not involved with that particular power structure, but there's enough there to give this oomph as far as government service goes. So I was on the verge of saying, if you want to read more about this, and especially the Dasha Bhuktis that propelled her into power, feel free to check out my website, navamsha.com, where you'll kind of get a recap of what I've talked about here today, and also some discussion of Dasha's Bhuktis and what is coming in the future for her. Okay, great. Thanks for following this, and check back again another time. Subscribe. I'll be doing many more of these.